So the first thing I should say is the average speaker IQ has just plummeted massively, having two eminent... Thanks, Rob. Having had two eminent economists, you've now got me. Second thing for me to say is that well, let me ask a question first of all. Who in this room believes that energy retailing currently works well for the UK energy consumer? Okay. Who in this room works for one of the incumbents? So, you know, commonly referred to as the Big Six. There must be somebody.
Too shy now.
Oh, nobody's saying. Well, I wanted to ask that question because I'm not here to Big Six bash. I am not a Big Six basher. There's nothing inherently evil or malicious. There is no ill intent that I can see manifesting itself in the incumbency in energy retailing in the UK today. What I do see, however, are big companies who will behave deeply, economically, rationally whenever they have the opportunity to do so. And in that lies the contradiction or the paradox of when is that in the interest of the customer and when not. So let me talk through some data points, some commentary, and just a few slides on this general subject. And I'm going to finish, this won't take long, and I'll finish with some recommendations on what I believe and what we believe needs to happen for the construct of UK retail energy to better serve the UK household. So, you share in your view with a number of different people what whether or not this market is indeed working. There's some commentary here and some numbers around overspend and also what people from mostly I guess political environment have concluded on this market. However, it goes statistically a lot deeper than this. I think this is a really interesting slide, and I hope you can all see it. I believe that the conclusions the CMA reached, I kind of concur with Dermot a little bit here, were actually pretty intelligent. Where I believe everything fell apart was in the measures that were brought forward, recommended, and Dermot is now diligently implementing. Because what they concluded was the market worked well for some people. And what we see is an enormous amount of activity in that top section there, what I shall refer to as engaged and active. There are people there for whom the market works extremely well. They have access to consistently good pricing that is at or about as good as it responsibly can be. Sometimes even it's irresponsibly good, i.e. sometimes at prices below cost. More of that later. So the market works well for, let's say, nearly 30%. Then there's that group that the CMA sort of said needed to be more engaged, which is the next sort of, I guess you would say, it's more than 30%. And these people kind of understand it, but they need a nudge or nudges or some kind of momentum, a stimulus, to get them to engage with the market. And I think this is where the CMA's measures really, really were underwhelming. In that really important sort of blue section at the bottom there, you see people for whom the market almost might as well not exist. And a lot of the groups in that segment are those who just don't know how to access the market. They really struggle. There are some small sections of that group of people who never intend to pay any attention to the market. Those for whom it's just not a consideration, they don't, maybe financially they're in a position where they don't have to be too concerned about it. But for a big chunk of people in blue there, they would most benefit from accessing the market in the way that section at the top accesses it, but they struggle the most to do so. There were some measures post-CMA around prepayment, in terms of trying to help there, but there are multiple other groups there who are disadvantaged in some way or other and who struggle to access the market. And I believe a great deal more needs to be done for them. So I think this slide is really instructive, because what it says is there are, broadly speaking, this is always a generalization, 3 markets here, and you have to be intelligent enough to bring measures into play, and whether it's an intervention or whether it's regulation or whether it's the industry actually, for once, actually trying to set an agenda here, that for that middle and bottom segment there, more needs to be done. So here are some big numbers. It's always good to have some big numbers, and this makes, for many in the room, I guess you will have seen these before, but it's worthwhile showing it again, because these numbers make shocking reading. I think the middle one is the one that I would pick out. I mean, that's pretty astonishing. So the standard variable tariff is, for me, it's an out-of-contract tariff. It's a transitional tariff. You should never be on it for any period of time, because, broadly speaking, it's the industry's worst product. It's the product you're on when you've made no decision to be on a product. It, generally speaking, and historically, has been priced much higher than other products. There are some reasons for that, but actually, the truth is, you should never be on it for any period of time. And what we see here is that not only is there a very high percentage of the market, anywhere between 65 and 70%, who are on an SVT as we speak. There's about 9 million households who have been on it for more than 3 years, and that simply cannot be right. And that is not a market that is best serving its customers, because if that percentage and number of households are on the industry's most expensive product for these kind of periods of time, then it ain't working. Someone said to me, actually I was in visiting the department, and I was making this point, and a very senior civil servant said to me, well, we've been told that actually the standard variable tariff is actually a really good product for some customers. It's only a good product for a tiny subsection, much less than 1% of customers who consume very, very little. And it's certainly a tiny percentage of the 16 million who are on it today. And I think the industry does not serve itself well by making statements like that, because it's simply not true. So this is the scope and scale of the issue that structurally we must address. And we continually talk about politicians, we continually talk about regulation. My enormous frustration is that there are big companies here who employ a lot of very intelligent and well-rewarded people. The industry should be doing more to face up to this as not being right. I'm going to let you read that. That was said, I believe, at the Select Committee recently. I think you were there, damn it. I think that was said at Select Committee recently. I mean, please, anyone who reads that is going to and looks beyond it and says, well, what does that actually mean for me as a customer, as a householder, as a bill payer? And in terms of the relative health of the market serving these customers, how unhealthy does that make things? Because competition is completely distorted by this. Because if you're able to leverage incumbency, and the kind of incumbency we can see on the previous slides, predominantly through the SVT product, and you then do this, then effectively what you're doing is cutting off the oxygen of competition. And that just simply, again, cannot be right. Here are some percentages. These are just stats. Like I say, what I'm articulating is the rational, fact-based situation around how the industry is operating today. If you are, I think if you're a shareholder in SSE, you'll be sitting saying, I'm a shareholder in an extremely well-run company. And if you look at British Gas, the difference between its best priced product, fixed one-year product, today, and its standard product is actually very little. And you'll hear British Gas talking a lot about that. The reality is, for a whole big chunk of last year, British Gas were offering products at below cost. Now, this is just an observation on my part, but why would you do that? Could you draw a line between that and the fact that at a particular set of results, shareholders expressed their discontent at the shrinking of the Centrica portfolio, the retail portfolio? Can you make a connection between those two things? And this, for me, when you go back to the level of engagement in the market or understanding amongst the general population, is it any surprise that people don't know what to do, that the engagement is sporadic, that you have this group of maybe 30% who get it, and when even a loss-leading tariff comes out, they'll take it, and they'll take it fast. And when the next one comes out, they'll take that as well. And if there's an exit fee, they'll say, okay, if that tariff's £33 cheaper and my exit fee's £30, I'll take the £33 cheaper and save the £3. And that's happening all the time. Bang, 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 bang. But then there's the 70% who at any given time are sitting there on the SVT. And there's the 40% who've never switched. So it ain't working. It just isn't. Now, if you look again here, I think it's very difficult to glean accurately what the marketing investment collectively of incumbency here, is what the amount of money we're talking about is in terms of continually telling your customers that actually everything's good, and the place you're in is a very happy place. It's well over £100 million a year, probably over £150 million a year. That's a lot of very persuasive messaging going to all those customers who are sitting there on SVT to tell them, you know what, you're okay. It's all good. Here's an endangered species walking through an urban landscape on its own. Here's a little doll on the back of a dog. And here are some people looking after your house with a penguin. It's all okay. So, this is not the most elegant language, but this is what Frank Field said, and that's typical, I guess, Frank Field style. This is what the Sun have said, and many other people have written in more, I guess, structured and analytical terms around some of the stuff that needs to be done and how things could just work better. By the way, this doesn't mean that if you're an incumbent, you can't still be a very successful business if this is fairer and works better for the customer. It just means you're going to have to work really hard at getting more efficient. And all that money you spend on tech, managing customers through their SVT on an ongoing basis, all that money you spend on marketing, then put some of that money into actually persuading people that they are transparently, honestly, and fairly on the best deal for them at all times. And if they're not, you're going to make a massive effort to make sure that they are. If you do that, and if you spend some of that money on making your business more efficient rather than creating structure upon structure upon structure, then you can be an incumbent and have all these customers, and you can still be a very successful business that shareholders will be happy with. Maybe not with the same margins as historically, but it places a compulsion on everyone to be more efficient and consistently make a better offer to the customers of the industry. So, what do I believe? What does First Utility believe should happen? Well, actually, I do believe an intervention is required, because whilst I do applaud the analysis that the CMA went through, as I said, I was entirely underwhelmed by the recommendations and measures that they brought forward. And I would say and assert that a reset is required, an intervention is required. And I think there are two words that I would apply to this. And if there are two words that I would ask you to kind of take away and think about, it's protect. So protect those who are vulnerable, protect those who struggle to access the market, so protect, and engage much more materially. And to get people to engage, let me talk about that first and then come back to protect. The reality is there is no reason why anyone should have been on an SVT tariff for more than 3 years. Move them to the best one-year product in that supplier's portfolio. And take them through that process. And then monthly after that, communicate to them what the market cheapest tariff is. And do that in a separate communication. Now, people might say, well, that won't work. And I'm sure if we had the retail leadership of any of the biggest incumbents here, they would say, oh, that's nonsense, it won't work. Ladies and gentlemen, it does work. If you look at the independent sector, at any given time, only somewhere, I guess, between 10 and 20%, I don't know the stats for every independent player, will have customers on the out-of-contract tariff or the rollover tariff, rather than the 70% or 60-odd% that you have on average across the big six. That is because of constant communication. It's also, of course, because the independents largely play in that top 30%, of course it is, of active customers. But particularly for that middle group, what the last few years have shown is that if you get people into a mindset that power and gas purchasing is an annuity, just like other annuities you have. It's a one-year deal. You can commit to even longer if you like, but it's generally speaking a one-year deal that you just have to remember to recommit to every year at the best price, the same as you do with car insurance or home insurance, in particular a lot of the financial services products. It does drive change. It means that at any given time, you have probably less than 20% of the whole market on SVT, ultimately. And I've said here we should aim to halve the number, so I'm not being as kind of aspirational as that 20%. But you'll get down to those kind of numbers. And more importantly, almost in a sense, there will be customers who do not stay on it for long periods of time. It's a transitional tariff. A transitional tariff. And that you're constantly trying to let people know that it's not the best tariff to be on. And like I said, data, statistics, and